Hi, I'm Sue Romanoff, the head of healthcare at Edison Group. I'm here with Haley from Canaccord Genuity. There's so much in healthcare IT that we thought a discussion would be helpful. We have the pleasure of catching up with 3 companies. And before we kick it off, maybe it would make sense if they did some brief introductions with some background on their company and their target audience and maybe region.
Hi, Sue. I'm Christine Marks at Spectral MD. I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Commercialization. Spectral MD is a digital wound imaging AI company. We predict clinical healing outcomes in 2 areas to start: diabetic foot ulcer and burn wounds, by providing a day 1 diagnosis of whether it will heal or not heal. We're a pre-commercial company, but we will go to market regionally, first in the US and then following into the UK. Thank you for having me.
Hi, Sue. My name's Stuart Gall. I'm CEO of Intelligent Ultrasound. As the name suggests, we're an ultrasound company, and our vision is to make clinical diagnostic ultrasound easier to learn, simpler to use. And one of the ways we do that is by using AI to help clinicians as they scan in real time, to give them automatic feedback, enable them to scan faster, scan better. We are at the commercialization stage. We have a number of products in the market. We sell both in the UK, the US, and in the rest of the world.
And I am Balaji Gandhi, Senior Vice President with Phreesia. Phreesia is a company that was founded in 2005. We're sort of known for the check-in process in the United States, but it's really a bigger software platform that automates four real focus areas: patient access, registration, payment processing, and clinical support tools, most notably patient-reported outcome measures. And over the last 17, 18 years, the company's invested about $500 million, completed an IPO in 2019, and is on track to do about 273 to 275 million of revenue this year. I think another important data point is we're now checking in about 1 in 10 patients across the country on our platform in the United States. We do have a small patient-reported outcome measure that we acquired last year that does have a contract with the NHS. So we are also doing business in the UK.
Thank you, Sue. Hello, as Sue said, I'm Haley Palmer from Canaccord Genuity. I'm one of the research analysts here in London, and I focus on the technology and digitally enabled healthcare sector.
Great, thank you guys. So let me kick off here with the first question. Healthcare is really complicated, right? And now we're layering in some new technologies, and I think as a result, there's a lot of fragmentation. What's the value of healthcare data? How do you make it usable? And then maybe you can kind of touch on some of the implied challenges. Christine, do you want to start there?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. So when I look at the value of healthcare data, it's the ability to personalize a diagnosis and a recommendation for a patient treatment pathway versus what's happening now is a lot of one size fits all. I think the challenges for me when it comes to adoption of AI technology in any sector is that combination of clinical adoption versus IT infrastructure. And is it there, and is it available, the resources to take these latest advancements and make it into everyday practice, because their resources are constrained and their priorities are constrained. So it's always balancing the two, between that clinical side and the IT resources side to adoption, this type of technology.
What I would add on that topic is around infrastructure. Our view at Phreesia is that actually healthcare is similar to other industries in that there are some antiquated infrastructures in other verticals. And so Jack Henry in financial services is sort of the guts of like an ERP system, or Sabre in travel. SAP is obviously still widely used in other industries. So a lot of these antiquated systems in healthcare do very important things. You just sort of need a modernized sort of layer on top of it to be able to deal with patients and engage. So that's what we really do. We have to be interoperable with all those other systems to be able to make, I think, and the other part of your question is make the data usable. And so, having high usage in healthcare has been the problem. not actually there's abundance of data. It's just make it usable, and that's what we're trying to do, and sort of have it flow.
And yours is actually a little different. You end up having to work on different platforms, right? Even more so outside of hospitals. Like within the hospitals, there's layers, and then on the payer side, there's layers. Maybe you kind of touch on that.
Sure,
Because
absolutely.
I think that's super important.
Yeah, so the node for us, I talked about, 120 million times a year, somebody's coming in to, to a clinician to, or, some sort of delivery setting to check in, and then you've got all these things that spin off it. We need to know what your insurance is. So we got to check with Aetna and Blue Cross and bump up against that, know what your eligibility is, know what your copayment might be. So that's one whole path. And then if it's the emergency room, you're then being triaged to, somewhere else. So it's almost like you're checking into one place, but then you're probably going to another place. And so each one of these is a bit of an island in healthcare, and you just sort of have to work across all of them. And again, like I said, we're taking that information and putting it in the various systems of record, and it has to be bidirectional. I don't know if that answers the question. But.
No, that's true. Stuart, maybe you can add a little bit to this with a little bit different perspective.
Yeah, so we're slightly different, but I think the value for us is, there's millions of images out there. We're in ultrasound, but it's the same for many other modalities. But can you access those images? Can you then use them to build algorithms that can, benefit either the hospital or the operator, in this case, the sonographer or the patient in the process? So, and each one has a different benefit. So, at the moment, there's particularly, we're building algorithms that are trying to help with scanning a baby at 20 weeks when you're looking for the abnormalities in that scan. And if you could build an algorithm that can actually help automatically identify what it is you're looking at, and then identify if that image that you're about to save has met the protocol, you can speed up the scanning process, but you can also de-stress that process for the person that's scanning it. People are under a lot of pressure at the moment. So can you help on both sides, help save time, but also help de-stress? Patient wins, hospital wins, sonographer wins. And I think there's a potential huge amount of data that can come out of all these millions of images that are all around the world in the hospitals that we can take advantage of.
Right. And Christine, maybe we talk a little bit, it's kind of an extension of this last question, but the competitive landscape is super interesting, right? We have really large guerrilla IT companies that are trying to layer their technology to analyze patient visits, clinical data, and they haven't fared so well. Maybe you can kind of tell us what your competitive advantage is, maybe a little bit about your platform or the expertise that helps you compensate for all these challenges that we've discussed so far.
Yeah, sure. Glad to. So, the gorilla is basically any provider that has access to the data, and that gives them the dominance to do that. But the ability to extract that data into a meaningful clinical outcome and solution is where sometimes the gap is at. And so where Spectral MD has that advantage is we have our proprietary imaging capturing system that has a multispectral image, and we pair it with the electronic health record on patient-specific physiological factors that power our AI to give it a day one diagnosis of, will this patient heal based on standard protocols, or do they need an alternate approach? And so, yes, there are gorillas out there, but sometimes it's taking really that problem and that pain point from a clinical side and making sure you can combine the power of data with a meaningful outcome.
Right. And I think that goes with the algorithms, right? I mean, and then also that database and kind of piecing it together, but making it repeatable, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we are very fortunate that we have had a 10-year sponsorship with the US government through a BARDA contract where we have the largest tissue database of images. And so that's our crown jewel to do that. So we're constantly, our AI is learning from this data set. So as we move forward, it will be able to be more and more powerful and segmented to certain disease states.
Balaji, I mean, your take is a little different, and we kind of touched on it already, but if you can chime in here, that would be great.
Sure, and I think on this topic, it's the thread is probably specialties. So when you think about, again, working across the entire, ecosystem, every specialty is different in terms of, the types of information you need to collect from a patient, upon seeing your provider. And I think, as Christine was saying, so similar to us, like now over the course of 16, 17 years and building this library, we now know if it's a urology group in Maryland, has to ask these questions of a patient. And then, a urology group in California is gonna have to do the same. And we just sort of get smarter and smarter and, and better about that. And then our life sciences clients benefit from that, because if they have a branded product or trying to get a targeted message to a patient, we're able to do that pretty effectively versus, advertising in a magazine or on 60 Minutes.
But there's also a scale consideration, right? I mean, you manage a lot of that same data, and I think that's actually important to emphasize here as well.
And the privacy and security around that. I mean, this is not data we're selling, or but we have to protect it, so we can create more of these products that are valuable. And so it's not just the storage of the data; it's the privacy and security part of it.
Maybe Stuart, can you add here to that competitive landscape comment?
Yeah, well, I mean, from our perspective, we're a very small company operating out of the UK. And I think how do you compete in environments like that? Because clearly we're up against big companies, massive multinationals, huge budgets, lots of people. From our perspective, well, it's actually small can be a benefit. You can spot, the niche that then actually is going to grow into something big. And you can be quick and you can be pretty flexible. And I think that's clearly very important from our perspective. That's how you stay ahead of the game. And then once you've got ahead, you try and partner up with the bigger companies to take that product to marketplace. In terms of how we access data relative to that, then it's, we tend to then partner up with a number of institutions, smaller institutions, work with them with that data, curate those images, build that AI algorithm out from that, and expand from that smaller base. And that's been a key to us getting into the marketplace. That's exactly how we started, out of Oxford University, and then bought a product that actually worked on the on the bench, and then took it out preclinical, and then got a big company very interested in it, and they launched it, and that's going very well. We work with GE to take that first product to market.
Well, and Stuart, you're saying it as a bad thing. I think the small companies have the kind of the dedication, and then also the right collection of data, right? I mean, you're massaging the data to be able to recall it. Maybe this is a little bit of a theme, repetitive on my part, but that consistency is actually super important, versus like the larger companies. They're kind of looking at it top down, and it's really hard to manage some of that data, because it's you obviously haven't cleaned it, you haven't tagged it, or something along those lines is the way I kind of think about it, maybe.
I think, yeah, and it helps, it certainly helps with focus when you're smaller. You are very, very committed to succeeding, or actually, failing quickly. It's
right.
Yeah, and I think it does help give you an edge in those early days.
Christine, maybe we could talk about like that patient journey a little bit. I mean, there's everything you're doing is focused on that experience, and then efficiency, and really care, right? I mean, have we learned something from that? Has it helped you? Has it hurt your business?
Yeah, actually, we're in clinical research studies across the country, and nothing was impacted at all. It was people who are looking for a solution for a long-term problem are going to look at AI to assist them. So it didn't impact us. Our patient journey for both diabetic foot ulcer and for burn patients is standard of care, which is a little bit of wait and see. And so here's the promise. Here's the promise of healthcare data and AI is we get to impact standard of care. And so what was fine 20 years ago, the ability of maybe you don't have to wait a duration of time to see if you will respond or not respond. If the AI tells you you can fast forward, let's say 4 weeks on a diabetic foot ulcer, then you can ultimately, as a patient, reduce the time for treatment and ultimately healing for that patient. And so we're just really in this powerful time where huge investments were done into digital healthcare, and to see how do we really impact standard of care in a new powerful way, because it's really that promise of personalized medicine, of really taking technology to say, you don't have to do the same 1, 2, 3 steps as everyone else. You might actually get to start with step 4. It's really going to impact the patient journey in a powerful way.
Right. And that's actually interesting. I mean, there were a lot of telemedicine calls, maybe. So maybe the data sources were different, or maybe you can kind of touch on that a little bit versus going forward and how that changed.
Yeah, for our company, as we were more in preclinical, but I can tell you from being in the US, all of a sudden with telehealth, the service for fees for telehealth and at home care were reimbursed at the same rate as going to a physician office. And so part of it was access. All of a sudden, the doors were wide open, that we had the same payment schedule that allowed ability for people to get treated regardless of where they were located. So it goes back to that promise of equity of care. And so you can have the ability to have that patient treated no matter where they enter in the system.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And Balaji, I mean, for you, it's interesting because you worked a lot with the providers, and then you had CROs. So you have like different buckets of your audience. Maybe you can give us a little bit of a taste of what we've seen so far, and what you kind of see going forward, and if that's changed.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, one thing we did not realize, I mean, it was probably April or May of 2020, was, as you may recall, there's a lot of confusion around what was going on with utilization trends. And, we were even, as in my investor relations role, we were getting calls from, analysts and hedge funds and what have you. And we actually we worked with the Commonwealth Fund and Harvard University and started publishing a bunch of research off of our network around utilization trends, because people just didn't have a sense whether people were in the office. And we published like 6 papers. We were asked to go and visit with the Congressional Budget Office, because the federal government's trying to figure out, as part of relief, like what is actually happening with utilization trends. So we actually realized, wow, this information is actually not readily available, which kind of blew us away. So we played a role from that perspective. But then I think the point about, things change. We learned things where people needed to check in without coming into the office. I mean, there was all these, and we got out of the hardware business effectively. And we had, some people wanted pads before to be able to check in their office, and now we pretty much are BYOD and send a link to you on your phone. So things adapted from a business model perspective, that we kind of wanted to happen anyway, but healthcare moves at the pace it does, and I think some of those things were accelerated. And then just the last thing I'll say is, labor. I mean, there's 1.2 million people in the United States that work in the front office. It's actually more than there are doctors. And that is Phreesia's sort of, value proposition is much like, a bank teller or some, or the airport check-in staff, and there was an acceleration in terms of what happened with the labor environment that has probably made our tool a little bit more valuable, where that labor can be redeployed to be doing more clinically oriented stuff instead of some of the mundane, registration stuff.
And that's interesting, because that ends up being a wrapper, right? Like you end up, there's got to be more value, like on that second incremental piece, right, where you're more entrenched in the client. So that
Absolutely.
Really,
I mean, then we get in there and they just keep finding more stuff for us to be able to collect and integrate with their systems.
Stuart?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, this wasn't something we could take advantage of, but I think it was a good example of how it had scanning lungs, using ultrasound scan lungs to check, were you, what was the progression or regression of it? And you had a lot of suddenly people needing to scan using ultrasound, but they didn't really know how to do it, and they had to be trained up to do it. If you had the ability, if we had automated scanning in that point, you would have been able to process people through. It was a really good example of how speeding up a process, enabling to sort of semi-automate some sort of simple triaging tool can be super beneficial when you've got a mass demand suddenly hits you. Yeah, that would all happen way too quickly, that you couldn't actually develop a product that quickly and get it through. The people weren't trying, but it was a good example of just how having some form of automated triaging tool could really benefit the hospital environment.
And there's also value though, because you had a lot of that data, you had some benchmarks to kind of look at, whereas other folks are probably scrambling, right?
Yeah, and I think from ironically the other side of our business is all about teaching you how to scan. Actually, we developed a module to do that, and that was brought out within 4 weeks, and it was given free to every hospital that had our simulators in it. That we did benefit from, but that doesn't really overlap into the digital environment. But yeah, so I think the other side of it, because it's 2 years later, everything sort of suddenly peaked and then it came off again, and suddenly then demand just starts to drop away. So it'll be an interesting thing to look back and see how many people rushed to develop stuff, but then didn't actually manage to get it into the marketplace in time and have had to back away.
Well, it's always good to get more revenues or more services, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So the next thing, it would be great if we could kind of talk about the growth, the opportunity. Where are you investing in? Where do you want to expand? Christine, you want to kick that off?
Yeah, so our investment's going to go into growing our database to go ahead and come up with new applications that impact tissue health. Obviously, as a pre-commercial company, we're going to invest heavily in commercialization by increasing our talent and our production capabilities to go to market in the US and the UK.
Obviously we're a public company, so this is all pretty clear out there. We're in the middle of a pretty, significant investment cycle. We were actually very efficient over the first 15 years. About $140 million was invested to get to about 100 million of revenue and get to about 5% of the check-ins that I talked about. And we got to where we're over 10 now. So basically, we've put an additional $300 million to work, R&D, product management, sales and marketing. There's some infrastructure, sort of G&A around being a public company, but all of that additional 300 million is to give us sort of a foundation to focus on, making sure our platform is fresh and secure and safe, while we can spin off some new products in the areas of appointment booking, patient reported outcomes, what have you. But the investments are working, and we've gone from 100 million when we went public to we're on, like I said, we're on track to do 273 to 275 this year, and have been fortunate to have the public markets finance that growth for us.
Okay, great. Stuart.
Yeah. So we for the last 4 years been basically building a number of products, one of which has been with GE. GE have launched it on their women's healthcare ultrasound machines. So that was a big step for us, and they just put it on the biggest one in their range this July. So that was a big step. And at the same time, we've been bringing on our own device that's in a separate area in local anesthesia. And that device just got FDA approval last week. So that's 2 big investments that are sort of coming through and now moving into, basically it's now all about selling them. But so our focus is going to be about building out the variants of those. So investing in new algorithms for different areas of different specialities. So we want to build, maybe 3rd, 4th platform in the future. But at the moment, it's all about basically start generating revenue from these products and investing in the new variants of those so that we can keep expanding those over the next couple of years.
So the AI term has been way overused in my opinion, and there's so many angles and there's so many ways to look at it. I think it's a good time to talk about how we think it will unfold. Haley, do you want to say a few words before the panel?
Yes, absolutely. I agree that the use of AI is just completely overused within the broader technology sector, and then looking into the healthcare piece. I think at the end of the day, though, in unlocking the value of data across the sector, and there's tons of it, it's the fastest growing data source globally. AI is going to be needed, but underpinning that is building the trust with patients, with the healthcare providers, and how you extract the value from that data is going to be necessary. And AI, I believe, is the key to unlocking that data.
Yeah, I do agree with both you, Sue, and Haley about the overuse of the word AI. You know, if you look back in 1991, if you can remember the Intel Inside campaign that powered the computers, and that campaign was a branded ingredient. And so maybe AI and machine learning at one point will have greater trust, and that through the right investment that leads to the value of better, meaningful clinical outcomes, those will be the winners from an investment standpoint. But I think most of the future healthcare diagnostics and imaging and patient, journey that's managed digitally, all of that will most likely have AI inside, just like Intel inside. So it'll be interesting in the future to see, will we lead things with AI and machine learning, or is it just, oh, of course, it's powered by AI? So it'll be interesting to see as we go forward.
That's an interesting way to think about it, Christine. I totally agree with that. Balaji, I mean, your take is a little different, but it'd be great if you can kind of say some words here.
I mean, I think whether it's payers or life sciences organizations, I think this idea of they have members, or they have, they're trying to target patients and consumers. And this idea of personalizing a lot of the communication tools to that population is not very effective, has not been for years. I mean, they're basically relying on old line media, pamphlets and TV. And so, we spend a lot of time thinking about, having now a network that can really target effectively, get the right message in front of the right patient, so you can actually have an impact and be actionable about whatever outcomes you're trying to achieve. Is that AI? Is that not? I don't know, but I think that's sort of probably the closest analog.
Stuart?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think from our perspective, I mean, we can see how we started with algorithms helping us teach doctors how to scan, and then the algorithms have become algorithms that are now in the clinic helping you scan in real time, giving you real feedback. And then how much is that going to go to the consumer, so that actually you'll be able to scan yourself at home? And then if you can scan yourself at home, and suddenly you open up, it's not just the market in the hospital, suddenly you're opening up the whole wellness market. Is it going to give traffic-like indicators about how good your health is, the health of your liver, the health of your carotid artery, that sort of thing? And that's all been scanned at home. And then you link into the digital doctor, who then helps you and completes the whole circle. I can see this whole market growing massively over the next decade.
That's actually super interesting. I can't imagine scanning myself in the kitchen, but that's really interesting thought. Yes. I didn't think about it that way.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. It was a great discussion. I think it's just the tip of the iceberg. If you would like to see more information, please refer to edisongroup.com. Thank you.